Welcome, everyone. Welcome, John, Michael, and Kathy. And I will turn
Thank
it
you.
over to you.
Thank you so much, Becky. I just want to also put in there that Kathy is a huge pet lover. She has a beautiful dog. We're going to talk about Levi later on, but we're all just we all just love pets. Anyway, I'm so excited to be here with you because sitting
It's an
down and talking
honor.
to you, we have not talked to each other for a while, except for last week. We caught up a little bit last week, which was great. But you have done so many things, and you're amazing, and you're a great friend, and it's such an honor to have you here. And I think we could just jump right in, if that's okay with you. And again,
Absolutely.
please feel free not to, if you don't want to answer anything today, just say, hey, not today, John Michael, and we'll go to the next thing. And there might be questions that may arise, and feel free to have that dialogue back and forth. But first, I want to thank you for being here. For those meeting you for the first time, would you be willing to share a bit of your story and the impact you've had that it had on you growing up?
Absolutely. As Becky said earlier, I am a survivor of long-term child sexual abuse. It started when I was 6, and the memory that sticks out is and I share this to explain the innocence of a 6-year-old. I had a large green stuffed bunny that I loved that I slept with. He was my protector. And when I would go to bed at night, he would have his back against my back. So he would look that way and I would look that way. And he would protect me from any nighttime monsters that were underneath the bed. And one night, that nighttime monster came, but it didn't come from under the bed. It was my stepfather. And that night began, unfortunately, a 6-year nighttime nightmare for myself. That night was the night that my stepfather started to sexually abuse me. And it ended when I was 12. And the harm that it created was immense shame. I didn't feel safe. I didn't trust the world. I had a very poor self vision of myself that I was bad because that's the type of cream that the abuse creates. But on top of that, before my stepfather would abuse me, he would tell me, "You're bad, and that's why I have to do this." So that deepened my shame. And that shame is why so many survivors don't tell. They never tell anyone. I didn't tell anyone. The only reason my abuse ended, partially this is sad, but the last 2 years of my abuse, my stepfather would unfortunately make me write down what he was going to do to me before he abused me. And he kept those for his sick pleasure in his wallet. It was a New Year's Eve night, and my mom and my stepdad had had an argument. And my stepfather left the bedroom, and my mom had a sixth sense to go look in his wallet. And when she did, she found the letters that he made me write. And my mother came and she woke me up immediately. And she asked me, even though she knew that was my writing, if I wrote those and then how long had it been happening. And I told her. And that night, my mom responded as every adult and every parent should respond. She responded quickly, swiftly, appropriately. She immediately kicked my stepfather out of the house. And that night, my mom became my hero. And that night began my long healing process.
Thank you. Thank you for being so transparent and open. This got me thinking. I think we all need a hero. And I think that's one of the things a lot of survivors feel like they're not allowed to have or something. And I know this is not what we were going to talk about, but can you share how important that hero is and how important that hero can help in the healing process?
I would love to, and that's a phenomenal question. It's demonstrative. And for people that don't understand this, when a trauma happens, especially to a child or a youth, it creates an imprint in the brain in our neural pathways, which is why there's so many mental health consequences for trauma, any type of trauma. And when a child then, either goes to a parent and tells or doesn't have a parent protect them that might know about the abuse, there's a secondary trauma to the brain. That's another traumatic imprint to the brain. Healing is possible, but when you don't have that hero, it makes healing that much harder because now you've got more trauma to recover from. So that response is so important. And sometimes, sadly, the heroes have to be ourselves.
Wow.
Sometimes we don't have that adult, sadly. And I wish I could say otherwise. And I would want any adult and every parent to hear how important it is to step up and protect and believe and tell children it wasn't your fault. But above all else, if we don't have that, the hero can reside within us.
Yes, and can the hero also be like an imaginary friend
Sure,
in that sense?
absolutely.
Because I just think sometimes as survivors, we try to find our heroes in different places, depending on who we are. And sometimes it can be an adult, sometimes it can be yourself. But sometimes there's that shame enough that we can't connect with ourselves in that way. And
Yeah,
so we kind of project it outward as an imaginary hero. Or we put it on, like you said, with your stuffed animal as our protector. And
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that. And I want people to realize that I know adult survivors who are all speaking around the globe that carry stuffed animals with them.
yeah,
I'm one of them. I will tell you that. And it's just one of those little security blanket kind of things.
yeah,
But now, when did you
absolutely.
I'm sorry, you wanted to say something?
No, that's okay.
I'm sorry, I cut you off. When did you first recognize that healing wasn't just about surviving,
Hmm.
but about reclaiming your voice, your identity, and your emotional health?
Awesome question. To be completely honest, my big step into healing happened when I was pregnant with my first child. And I knew in that moment that I did not want my children to ever feel like I did or have happened to them, what happened to me. But I also had that innate motherly sense that, okay, that means you need to step into that. You need to step into healing. Like I was doing small things, but that was the biggest precipitous towards me realizing that something had to change. And for me to be the best parent I could be, I had to step into that process. And I was working through my healing process as I had my kids. I call myself a trauma mama because I was. And I would say for myself and all survivors, healing is worth it. And you've got this, you're worth it. But it's also evergreen and it comes with setbacks. I had setbacks in my own journey. And we can reach a great place, but I don't think there's a final destination because I truly think it's evergreen and there's value in constantly growing and helping ourselves. And it was as I worked through my steps in my own healing process, I then realized how each step that I was taking was going to play a role in my mental health and my emotional health. And if I could find a way to truly let it go, which meant I had to move through it, that which was going to hurt. Quite frankly, it hurt like hell. But if I could move through it, I could start to get my power back. And for me, being a parent made it worth it.
I'm so glad you said that about the children because I think there's a lot of survivors that experience what they did and choose not to have children so that they don't even take the opportunity of passing that on to their other children, that generational abuse.
Yeah.
But you didn't. You said, I have this child and I'm going to do everything I can. So that became that motivation for you to heal. And you have this incredible book.
Thank
And
you.
it's amazing. So everybody, if you get a chance, you need to read this. Broken to Beautifully Whole. I just want you to talk first, and then I will get back to our other questions. But how did you come up with that title? And what does this image here mean to you? Because it's a beautiful how you describe this.
Thank you. The title was in process of my writing, and for myself, of 6 years of abuse, I was broken. I was very broken, and I would use the word shattered. And as I healed, my goal was, can I pull myself to back together? And as I did my research for my book, and I had my title, I had a different image in mind for the cover of my book until I came across kintsugi. So kintsugi is what is on the cover of my book. And if for those who don't know, kintsugi is a Japanese art where they take something that's been broken and pull it back together with lacquered silver or gold because it comes with the philosophy that when something is broken, it can be repaired, it can be mended to become stronger and more beautifully whole because the cracks are meant to be highlighted, not hidden, a means of becoming whole again. Because for us survivors, many of us, and I did for many years, want to hide. I didn't want to share my story. I didn't want people to know my story because we so badly want to be liked and loved. And I was so afraid, what will people think of me? Will it burden me with more shame that I already have? But I had reached a point where I realized that the mission within healing, the mission of helping people understand that there's things we can do to create prevention, the mission for standing up to support survivors was far more important than my fear. Because I was in a great place before I wrote my book, but I learned that I still had that shame hanging on because I almost didn't publish. Why? What will people say? What will they think? What will my friends think? But over and over, my message back was, it is time. And as I said, the mission is bigger than your fear.
Beautifully said. And I love that even when I'm reading through your book, I get this feeling that you give us permission to look at the cracks.
Yeah,
And that's what your whole, that's part of what I don't know if that's true. I'm putting words in your own mouth. But as I read through it, it was like saying, John Michael, I'm giving you permission to look at your scars, the lines that they made, because what has happened has made you who you are today.
yeah,
And if we can really, all of us who are survivors can look at that and realize what a beautiful thing that is, it kind of just takes that heaviness off. Are we still going to feel shame? Are we still going to feel? Yes. And you beautifully already said it that there are setbacks, that healing is an evergreen process.
yes,
Sometimes we feel we're taking 2 steps forward and 5 steps back, but we made those steps forward.
yeah,
So we're further along than we were before. And I like to tell people as they're going on their journey that once you start the journey, you can never really go back. You could try, but you've already changed,
yeah,
And since you've already changed, when you go back to what you think is safe, it's no longer needed and you're going to feel uncomfortable. So keep the forward movement. And it's just so amazing. The book is incredible. It's beautifully written. It speaks so personal to you. I was talking to another survivor who read your book, and we felt like you were talking personally to each of us.
oh,
And the information that we were receiving is what we needed for our healing, which might have been different than her healing.
absolutely.
And that's the glory of your book. It's just
Oh,
amazing that you do that. And I know you speak often about childhood trauma. And you've got a whole set of kids' books series that we're going to talk about, which is The Adventures of Gus and Basha. But I want to hold on off on that for just a second. And I want to say that when you talk about childhood trauma that disrupts our ability to trust, you talked a little bit about that already, to feel safe. You also touched on that, and to believe in ourselves. What are a few practical mental or emotional health boosters you can recommend to survivors who are still rebuilding?
Well, I love that. I'm going to give, so in my book, to go backwards a little bit, I talk about the 6 attributes that I used in my healing journey. And, but one of the ones that I think is the most important and sometimes the hardest, not the hardest, I can come back to that and answer that later, but that I always use one of the ones that I still go backwards today, and that's self-compassion. Because when we have that much shame and when we don't know our worth, we don't know our value because of what happened to us, shame is immense. And shame and self compassion cannot sit side by side. There's no room. And the gift, if we're willing to step into self compassion, if just a little bit, then the shame starts to go down and then self compassion starts to rise. But the once we start it, the gift of adding it into our life is it raises your awareness. And when it raises our awareness too, what are the self conversations? What am I saying to myself? What am I thinking about myself? How would I say this to my best friend when we do things like, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not blank enough, whatever it is, I'm so stupid. How could I do that? I can't do this. We say stuff like that to ourselves all the time. Or I'm not worthy of healing. Because those were the things I used to say to myself. And when you add that self compassion, talk to yourself the way you would your best friend. If your best friend just walked in the room, sat down across the table with you with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and they said, "Oh, I'm so fat. I'm so stupid. I can't do this." What would you say to your best friend? Why would we not talk to ourselves the way we would our best friend? What if you started talking to yourself the way you would your best friend? And I know it's cliched to say that, but it's true. When you look in the mirror and talk to yourself, like, darn it, I like this about myself. And self compassion allows you to see the gift of who you are and stop the comparison, because that's the other problem with shame is we compare ourselves to others and don't feel like we measure up or we're not worthy to measure up. So self-compassion is so important. In my mind, one of the first steps in the healing process to boost your mental health, and the science shares, and I share this in my book, when we start applying self compassion, the science shares with us what it does to the brain by reducing cortisol and boosting the feel good hormones.
I love that. And it's very interesting how those two chemicals in our brains can act like each other, you know? And sometimes we can become addicted to the negative chemical in the brain and not understand why, because it gives us a bit of a euphoric feeling. Both of them do. And
Yeah.
we need to really take the time to figure out, okay, which chemical am I releasing? Am I over here releasing because the long-term chemical in your body is not good, and we have science about that. And is there a way to tell the difference, or do you know a way?
Yeah. So the other one of the other attributes that I talk about is the healthy perspective. And to what you just said, so basically a healthy perspective is, or a perspective period, is the way we see the world. How do we see the world? Do we see, everybody knows the term glass half full, glass half empty? Which are we? We all can have both. That's normal. That's real life. It's normal to have glass half empty moments. It's normal to maybe even have a glass half empty day. What we don't want is a glass half empty months, a glass half empty year, or to unpack our bag and live there. Because the science also shares that when we start to put our focus on the negative and what's wrong, and again, please know these moments are normal, it's healthy. But if we can take that negative moment, that negative feeling, and set it side by side with something good, it helps us start to get a balance of a healthier perspective. And the more we can go, okay, well, I love my dog. I love the way my dog comes running up to me and he wags his tail. That's a good thing. This part of my day really stinks, or this moment in time, I'm just ruminating on my past. The more we can find something good, anything good, no matter how small it is, it doesn't mean be Pollyanna-ish or false positivity where you go too far the other way, but finding that good, that slightly glass half full moment, at least starts to put it into a healthier perspective. Because the other problem, if we unpack and live in that negative perspective, it produces anxiety and it also tears down our resilience. And we don't want that with trying to build and grow stronger mental and emotional health.
Exactly. And I come back to this thought that you, as you were speaking, that our body is constantly telling us what we're doing and what, what aspects we are. When we're feeling sick, why are we feeling sick? Could it be one of those long, you know, negative periods that we put
Yeah.
ourselves in, and our body's
Yeah.
saying, wait a minute, because our natural default is to be happy and healthy. And we have been taught, through, people around us, and we borrow other people's ideas that we're not allowed to be happy and healthy. That's abnormal. And what's it's really funny is because it should be the other way around.
Yeah.
But as we go through our lives, we do that, and we constantly will tell ourselves. And the thing that I love what you just said, and I'm going to put words back into your mouth, and please forgive me, but I loved what I heard is that it's okay to feel these things.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to beat ourselves up on if we can actually just say, I'm feeling down today,
Yep.
own it, and and
Yep.
and try to figure out, okay, what's causing me to feel down?
Yes.
It's when we ignore that we're feeling down and we try to be Pollyanna because people tell us to, and we're covering it up even more. We don't even realize we're doing it. You talk about, and please uh, uh, help me on the CPR of health habit model. Could you share a little bit about that and tell us what that is? Because when I think of CPR, I think I'm giving somebody, resuscitation and trying to get them up, but it's kind of similar in a way.
It is. So all of us understand, as you just said, CPR is cardiac pulmonary resuscitation, bringing somebody back to life. As a survivor, as we move through our healing process, sometimes we need that boost of what I'm going to call CPR to bring us back to life, meaning bring us back to our full potential, meaning bring us back to becoming whole, bringing us back to becoming kintsugi. So for me, CPR stands for choice, practice, reflection. Number one, make the choice. Make the choice to step into the healing process because you, my friend, everyone is worth it. Make the choice to maybe add some things in your life that will help you heal. Make the choice to make good choices with your food, with what are you drinking. Make the choice to be around people who are going to help you heal. Who's going to help you? Who's your sum of five that are going to get you there? And then P, put into practice. Put into practice. What are you going to do? What books are you going to read? What attributes are you going to try to add to your life to improve upon yourself? Help yourself because you deserve that. And then lastly, reflect. When we make the choice and we start putting things into practice, and then we take the time to reflect. The reflection tells us, okay, I did pretty good with some of these. Okay, I maybe didn't with these other things. Or as I reflect, man, I was way too hard on myself with a mistake I made this week, with the failure I had, because that's real life. We all have mistakes, we all have failures. But when you start putting better habits into practice and you've made that choice, the reflection allows you to know, okay, I went backwards. I'm going to move forward again. I'm going to get back to that. Or maybe you made the choice of adding, I'm going to use self-compassion, for example. Like every day, I'm going to get up and say, you know what? It's going to be a good day. You're worthy of having a good day. And I'm going to talk to myself with kindness. And if you go backwards, the reflection says, okay, I need to get back to that. I need to go back to talking to myself the way I would my best friend. Or another example, one of the attributes I talk about is gratitude. Hey, I'm going to start a gratitude journal. I'm going to make the choice to put into practice adding gratitude to my life every day, even if I just write down one thing, even if I write down two things. And then you reflect, you go, oh, well, I only did that a couple of days this week. That's okay. Give yourself grace. You know what? I'm going to work on doing it 3 days a week. So the choice, the practice, and the reflection allows us to move through the healing process much easier and work towards becoming whole again.
Brilliant. I love that. I keep saying brilliant to you today. That's the only word that keeps
Oh,
coming up.
you're too kind. You're way too
And
kind.
you know, another part of that reflection is something that I like to work with when I'm working with survivors is to make a timeline, and write down all
Love
the
that.
things you've celebrated from the time that you were a little kid all the way through the traumatic process. And if you are really able to do that, it doesn't matter how big it is. It could be something really small. I made Christmas presents for my parents one year, or I did this. I opened the door for an older woman, or anything. You just write it down, and it's one of those things that it's a living document that you can add to it and go back. Because
Yeah.
once you start that, you'll start remembering. And then I like to have them go back and look at that time, at the period of the trauma, and look at the successes that you still had while you were going through that. Because we don't think about those,
Oh, love it.
you
Love it.
know?
Love it.
And you just keep building onto that and building onto it, which is another way to start celebrating yourself. And I think that's really powerful. So now in your first book, I'm going to hold it up again so everybody can see it. In your first book, you're writing in your first book you about healing. What others do the same thing? I didn't say that right. How did your writing your first book help you heal? How did
Mm.
that help you heal? And then let's compare that to how writing the children's book helped you heal.
Uh,
Are they the same or have they grown?
awesome question. I would say they were different. So to go to my first book, Broken to Beautifully Whole, the first part of my book is called Through the Eyes of the Child, because that's what happened during those 6 years. It is not graphic at all. And that is intentional because I didn't want it to be any type of an over trigger. But here's what I did want with that is I wanted people to realize what it's like to live through trauma as a child. I wanted them to see it through the child's eyes and what a child feels. And my hope also with that was so that maybe other survivors could gently kind of release themselves. So for me, that was some tough writing, but oh my gosh, incredibly cathartic, incredibly healing, an incredible release. And then when I started writing about the attributes that I used, it kind of put me into the mode of applying them even more into my life as I wrote about them. So the writing was a release. And again, publishing, as I talked about earlier, it was another release of the shame because you make yourself so vulnerable sharing a story like that. Less than 10 people in the world knew my story. If I publish this book, the world's going to know my story. I tell so many people, and I know I've shared this with you, John Michael, but it's like standing naked, completely naked in front of millions of people and saying, "Hey, check out my flaws." Because that's how you feel. That's the best metaphor I can use. And to vulnerably share my story and then have others come back and say, "Oh my gosh, Cathy, this helped me because of this. This helped me because of this, or this part of your book really helped me through this. This helped me through my marriage." Whatever people shared, an incredible honor, but it also was healing back to myself in some way, knowing that, okay, this is empowerment in sharing our stories so that others can somehow find a way to heal themselves. So then when I progressed to my children's books, which I never thought I'd write, I never thought I'd write my first book, but that was a conversation with a client that propelled me on a purpose I never saw coming. But I was out speaking about my first book, and there was a counselor in the audience who had read my first book, and he raised his hand and he said, Cathy, I think one of the most powerful parts in your book are the healing attributes you used in your journey and how they helped your mental and emotional health, because that's the number one consequence from trauma, childhood trauma. He said, with the crisis with our children, why in the world would you not take your attributes and turn them into children's books? Hadn't thought of that. Didn't think of that. And boy, did that stick with me. And I came home and I reflected on it. I started doing more research to, okay, they helped me, but can these help children? And then I talked to a pediatric psychologist at Children's Hospital here in Columbus, Nationwide Children's. And I asked him, I shared my story briefly, and I said, okay, I don't want to recreate the wheel. But is something like this exist? And he said, there's pieces and parts, but not what you're trying to do. He said, Cathy, you need to do this because this is what you're doing is helping plant the seeds because all children are going to have hurts, hardships, and emotional pains. That's real life. Like it or not, we're all going to go through that. And yes, when we look at the statistics, some kids are going to undergo trauma, some kids are going to undergo abuse. Imagine a world where we plant the seeds of steps, of attributes, of habits we can help our children build that will give them the tools to not only thrive through the hurts and the hardships, but reach success. And as I wrote each of those books, to go back to your question, it when I wrote it from trying to think of the perspective of a child, it took me back to when I was a child and how would I have responded if I would have been able to start adding those attributes in my life as a child because I didn't start adding those till I was an adult. So it compounded the value of, okay, what did I feel like? And through my children's books, The Adventures of Gus and Pasha, all the animals are going to go through some type of a challenge or problem that almost all kids are going to face. We do not talk about trauma, yet these books can benefit kids that have gone through trauma to build those tools. And it was empowering. And my hope is that they empower other survivors with my first book and empower children to develop that stronger mental and emotional health because that's so important today as we work through the challenges of life.
Totally agree. And I do want to add one other thing to this
Yeah.
is that your children's books are actually very good for adults as well. Because
Thank
if we're
you.
survivors, we still carry that child. Oh, I mean, I think every adult has that child within them. And depending on what trauma or whatever you experience, that child is still wanting to be acknowledged and noticed. And through this book, this could help adults as well to take those six tools and apply them to themselves to get back in touch with their child. I was just at the Just conference in Orlando, Florida, a couple months ago, and I met this incredible woman. She has changed my life actually, and she's legally blind, and she's a very beautiful soul. And she's just went through her story, and she told me, and yet she says I created this art piece, and it was out on display, and I had to go look at it. Cathy, I stared at this piece and I lost the words. It was
Wow.
so beautiful that
Yeah.
she was able to tell her story through this piece of artwork. And the fact that she was able to do it in a creative way, some people will write, some people will sing, some people will dance. But I do believe that finding a creative outlet
Yes.
Gets you in touch with your child that
Yes.
is hurting inside. We've created that distance with that child because that's the child that was hurt. And in my case, mine was from 14 to 18. Don't ask me what happened during those days, those years. I don't want to remember. And I mean, I won the World Games when I was 16, and those medals have been sitting in a box forever because every time I look at them, all I feel is this pain.
Mm,
Until I started to realize, look what you did during this time.
yeah.
Grab that little child and just love them because they're part of you, and they're waiting for you to be there. Um, I also believe that we don't have to expose our story to the world. It takes certain people who are able to do that in a way that is effective and
Yeah.
can move people forward. I've been at too many times at conferences or hearing discussions where people are celebrating the ugly details of what they went through up on stage in front of everyone. And I'm sitting there thinking, why are you doing that? You're not only traumatizing yourself again or re-victimizing yourself, but you're also now have to be responsible for all these people out here that are
Yeah.
listening to you. And I'm telling you, I don't think everybody wants to come and hear about all those little nitty-gritty details.
No.
And I love that you said that even in your book, you talk about what happened, but it's not about that detail. The event
No.
happened. There's nothing we can do to change the event.
Correct.
But I think that if we can change the way we look at it, we can change the meaning that we attach on it, which can heal us and help us move forward to become thrivers or whatever adjectives people want to use. But do people have to come forward and tell their story? Or what does telling their story do, excuse me, do for that person?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That is so well said. And I love what you said about the inner child because when that trauma happened as a child, so much of our healing is a big piece of us is still that wounded child. So I love that you said that. And just real quick, when you said that, it made me think of one of the stories. So before I published my children's books, I did beta classrooms, beta teachers, and beta family readers. And I just want to share a real quick story from one of the beta families. And this dad had shared this story. So he read the books to two of his young children. And so he read book 4, which is called Ellie Stops Bullying Herself because we do that. So that book's
Mhm.
the one about self-compassion. So he had read that book to his daughter and they talked about it for a little bit. And then he said good night. And he said, Kathy, he said, I went out in the living room and I sat down and I reread the book to myself. He said, I needed to hear it. And that was such an honor to hear that. And I've had a couple other stories like that. So thank you for saying that. And you are so right. But sometimes hearing it from a child's perspective helps us go, okay, yeah, I get it now. I need to do this, or this would be helpful for me. And that's that's been powerful.
That's the power of your words and your work. And it's
Wow.
rippling out there to so many people. And
Thank you,
I
friend.
encourage everyone to read the children's books as well. I think reading your first book is a great, almost like an introduction in a way. Do you know what? You get all the hard facts out on an adult level, and then you read the Adventures of Gus and Pasha, and you allow yourself to fall into that healing process in a gentle, loving, self-caring way. And
Yeah.
it's so important to everybody. And I know that we want to continue talking about the children's book a little bit. Why is it so critical to help children rebuild resilience and emotional intelligence early before trauma and abuse happens?
It's again like planting the seed and building that strength. It's almost like you're helping them. I hate to use this example, but almost like armor because let me go a little geeky and sciencey. This would probably be a better way to explain it, but These attributes, one of the deepest reasons why they helped me so much was because they played a role in my mental and my emotional health because of what they did to my brain. And I do share that in the book of the how and the why behind that. Because again, remember when I said earlier about the trauma creates an imprint in the brain. And then if adults don't respond appropriately, that's another imprint in the neural pathways in the brain. The attributes that I share in my book, the attributes that I have in the children's books help release that imprint. So as a child and we go through that trauma, we want to release that imprint. But if you strengthen that neural pathway, which is exactly what these attributes do, if you strengthen that neural pathway, it's easier for the hurts, the hardships, the emotional pains, or the potential trauma to bounce off. Think of it like they're going to reflect. Think of it like a trampoline. A trampoline is a better way to say that. You bounce on, you can bounce off. These would likely bounce off versus if we don't build that strength and we don't have that resilient growth mindset, it's easier for that trauma to create that imprint and kind of bury itself into the neural pathways. So when they start to add these in their life, and if they can add them as a habit, even just a little bit of a habit, it builds that stronger neural pathway. Think of it like exercise too. So we all know, hey, if I exercise once a week, am I going to be fit? Am I going to be that better pickleball player? Am I going to be that better soccer player? Am I going to just be a little more toned if I just want to be toned? Once a week isn't probably going to get you there. 2 to 3 times a week, yeah. 4 times a week, yeah. You don't have to necessarily do it seven, but if we want to be fit, if we want our body, if we want our heart to be healthy, we need to do it ideally 2, 3, 4 times a week. Our mental health is the same way. If we can do things for our mental health 2, 3, 4 times a week, we're building that healthier mind to go with the healthier body. And if you start that in children, now you've got that compounding effect. Meaning, let's those who have children, if they put money into a bank account for college and they start at the day the child's born, that money's got compounding effect. These attributes do the same thing for our mental and our emotional health and our mindset. And that's what we want. We want that compounding effect. We want that stronger neural pathway.
Definitely. And it's been proven recently that the brain keeps growing until
Yes.
we take our last breath. Something which is really different for a lot of people to hear because we've been taught that our brain stops growing at a certain age. That's not true. And the neural pathways keep developing. And the more we practice those neural pathways, they will get stronger, just like you said. And it's really interesting is that I talk a lot about when people go through trauma, their brains will refigure itself so it doesn't have to go through that trauma all the time.
Yeah.
So if we say a normal person's brain on figuring out an answer to a question is A, B, C, D, a survivor may go A, Q, P, R, S, T, L, M, N, O, then get to it, but they'll get to it. And
Yeah.
we've got to celebrate that because our brain is protecting us from having to relive
Yeah.
that traumatic experience every time. And by
Absolutely.
doing these tools that you have, we can release that detour and
Absolutely.
make the straight line quicker and get to where we need to faster. And I
Yeah.
think that's really a brilliant way. There's so many things I want to talk about that are popping in my head. We talked about creative ways. Creative ways is also an incredible way because you start thinking on the right side of your brain opposed to the left side, where the left side is where we have all of our facts. We put everything in files. This means this. As humans, we are taught that we have to identify everything and put them in a file. And if we don't, then we feel bad. But I
Yeah.
love what you're saying to us today is if we go more on the right side of the brain, the creative side, and give ourselves permission to not always be have to be right, but to be in that moment at that present and go, okay, that didn't work, but let's not beat myself up on it.
Yes.
What would work better this time? Or what can I try? And then
Yes.
it becomes a collaboration with yourself. And
Yes.
I think that's a really cool. I know we've talked about this before, and I just want to bring it up because I don't want to lose our time on this. Is the word vulnerability.
Mm.
And we've had this conversation, and I just want people to hear that because our frontline people and the people who are helping survivors are always calling them vulnerable children. And what I am trying to say is, are the children vulnerable, or are they placed in a vulnerable situation? Because I think as a child going through what I went through, I know a couple of other survivors I spoke to never saw themselves as vulnerable. Even a child that I talked to who ran away to get away from a really bad situation at home onto the streets never identified as vulnerable. Yes, were they put in a vulnerable situation? Yes. But when our frontline people call us vulnerable children, it brings this ugliness almost to it, a shame. I don't want to be vulnerable, so I'm not going to talk about it. And so I know that's probably more evident in males than females, just because of the way we're raised. But how can we change that narrative?
Oh, I couldn't agree more, and that's such a good point. I think our goal is to create non-vulnerable children. Our goal is to create boundary smart children. Our goal is to develop stronger, resilient children. I wish that word was being used. In my first book, I talk about things that every single person can do with children, rather they're, if you're an uncle, you're an aunt, you're a parent, you're a grandparent, things that we can do to help our children not be vulnerable. I talk about things to start doing. I talk about things to stop doing. Just real quick, I'm going to give one example, tickling. Tickling children can be a healthy bonding experience between a parent and a child, a grandparent and a child, but it can also create harm. If a child goes, stop, stop, and the parents go, oh no, they think they like it and they keep going, that's a problem. You just started to create a vulnerable child. Let me share why. Because you just taught them the word stop
Doesn't
doesn't
mean
mean
anything.
anything. You just taught them they don't have a boundary. And that is the opposite of what we want to do. That creates vulnerable children. Another example I give in my book is when people walk in the door, and and we're coming into the holidays, we're going to Thanksgiving and Christmas. Please, please tell your children they don't have to hug everybody. They don't have to kiss everybody just because they say that. I see people walk in the door, come on, give Grandpa Joe a hug and a kiss. And the kids kind of hold back and they stand by mom's leg and they go, no, go give him a kiss. Please don't do that. Again, you just taught them they don't have boundaries and they can't be safe and they can't say no. That creates vulnerable children. And that is exactly what we don't want to do. We want to teach them they have body boundaries. We want to teach them they can say no. We want to teach them if something's uncomfortable, please tell us. I will keep you safe. I will believe you, and it won't be your fault. We want to teach them this because that creates stronger, more resilient children, boundary smart children. And I agreed, I don't like that term.
Right. And I just want to like move this into this other question that we have here. What myths about child sexual abuse do you wish society would finally stop believing?
Oh, my
Honey, you've
biggest.
hit on so many of them in those incredible experiences, but what do you feel about that?
My biggest pet peeve is, and I hear this, and I heard this not that long ago, is, well, you know what? Children are resilient anyways. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. Get over it. They're resilient anyways. Kids are to a point. When people say that, they're unaware, uneducated, and ignorant to the consequences of what happens with trauma and child abuse. They're unaware of the mental health consequences. They're unaware of the shame. They're unaware of how they view themselves. They're unaware of the brokenness. They're unaware of not knowing their value and worth and what that can do. They're unaware of not just the mental health consequences, but the health consequences because survivors go on to have higher risk of heart disease, higher risk of diabetes. That list goes on and on and on. So when we say, they're resilient anyways, that's harmful. That creates harm. And I would want to raise awareness to say, please, please understand, let me raise your awareness to what the consequences are and why it is critical, A, to prevent. But B, if something happens, to support properly, to let them know this wasn't your fault. I believe you. I want you to have a voice. I want you to be heard and do everything within our power to protect them.
Beautifully said. I have this for you. You talk so much about potential, possibility, and purpose. If healing were a garden and we were planting seeds for the next generation, what three seeds would you put in the soil?
Oh, oh my gosh, I love that metaphor. Uh, okay, so I would want, I love how you said that. I would want to plant all my attributes because that's like picking your favorite. If I had six children, which I don't, I only have two. But if I had six children, pick three. But I that is so good. Um, Here's what I would pick. Please plant the seed for self-compassion because if you do that, you will know your worth. You'll know your value. You won't want to compare yourself to other people, and you will set healthy boundaries. And when you go backwards and start to become hard on yourself, you'll give yourself grace through those mistakes and those failures. And everyone is worthy of that. I would also say a healthy perspective because the ability to work through the bad, feel it, but also add something good because I almost feel that's every bit as important to our health, our happiness, our resilience, and our how we experience life because when we walk around with too much of that negative perspective, it takes away the joy and the happiness that each of us deserve to have in our life. The third one, oh, this is hard, but building resilience helps connect with my to my last one, which is hope, because if we can build that resilience, and resilience is different from a healthy perspective, it's different from self compassion. And the gift is they all connect piece by piece, just like a piece of kintsugi, because there's corners of those broken pieces touch. And when we have that healthier perspective and can find some good, it builds our resilience instead of tearing it down. And when we add that self compassion builds our resilience instead of tearing it down. When we feel that shame, remember how I said shame and self compassion can't sit side by side? So when we lower the shame and build the self compassion, we become more resilient. How we talk to ourselves, how do we listen to ourselves? How do we give ourselves grace? All of that builds our resilience. And then also just finding humor, having the ability to find humor in your life, like some of the things you and I've talked about and we've done in the past. That sense of humor builds resilience. It gives levity to life. And it just makes the inevitable challenges we're still going to go through that much easier. So I like all six, but that would be my three.
Well, I just want to add this that every season there's a planting season.
Yes, I
So you
love
can
it.
add more and more and more.
Perfect.
One quick thing before I bring Becky back. What is one thing you'd like to share with survivors?
You, my friend, are worthy. You are worthy of so much. You are worthy of happiness. You are worthy of joy. You are worthy of healing. You are worthy of loving yourself. And you are a gift. You are believed. You have value. And nothing was your fault, my friend. And so please take this step. Give yourself grace through the challenges, the setbacks of life, because you have a potential that you maybe haven't met quite yet, my friend. So just please know you're worthy of, I'll finish with this, you're worthy of love, even if it comes from yourself.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for being here. And let's bring back Kathy. I mean, you're Kathy. Let's bring back Becky. Oh
It's
my
okay.
goodness. I was so moved. That was beautiful.
Oh,
Hi,
thank
Becky.
you.
Becky, thank
Uh,
you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. And I say this often, but I will say it again today, how honored and privileged I am to just be able to create this online space and then just take myself off camera and watch like everyone else and absorb the warmth and the wisdom coming through my screen. I mean, I'm truly just the luckiest person in the world that I get to do this. So thank you both for such a beautiful, beautiful conversation. I mean, it just lifted my spirit, and I know it did others who are watching. So thank you so much. I appreciate you both for taking the time. For folks watching this live and who will watch the recording, I know that you will get so much out of this, and that's what it's all about. We are all about making sure that survivors feel that they're not alone, that they feel accepted and loved and validated and valued. And you both are exceptional at that. So thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me. This was an honor, and I love this. Thank you for the space. Thank you for the conversations, and thank you for what you're doing.
Appreciate that.